Roy S. Moore, the first Republican to lose a United States Senate race in Alabama in 25 years, moved late Wednesday to block state officials from certifying the victory of his Democratic rival on Thursday afternoon because of systematic voter fraud. In a complaint filed in the circuit court here in Alabama's capital, Mr. Moore's campaign argued that such fraud had tainted the December 12 special election, which Mr. Moore lost to Doug Jones by fewer than 22,000 votes, and that the Alabama authorities had inadequately investigated claims of misconduct. If the election is prematurely certified, Mr. Moore's lawyers wrote, he will suffer irreparable harm and be denied his full right as a candidate to a fair election. John H. Merrill, the Alabama Secretary of State, has dismissed complaints, from Democratic and Republican critics, of election fraud. In an interview on December 15, Mr. Merrill, a Republican who voted for Mr. Moore, flatly declared, I have not seen any irregularities or any inconsistencies that are outside the norm. In a text message early Thursday, Mr. Merrill said he did not intend to postpone the certification proceedings that would ultimately allow Mr. Jones to take office. In a statement on Thursday, Mr. Jones's transition team said the lawsuit was a desperate attempt by Roy Moore to subvert the will of the people. The election is over, the statement added, it's time to move on. Whether or not the litigation is successful, it is certain to infuse a strain of drama into a day that state officials have plainly hoped would be procedural and perfunctory. The lawsuit from Mr. Moore, who has been accused of bigotry and sexual misconduct against teenage girls, was certainly late in coming. His lawyers filed the complaint at 10:33 p.m. on Wednesday, and his campaign announced it less than an hour later. Alabama officials are scheduled to certify the results during a 1 p.m. meeting Thursday at the state capitol. Yet in some ways Mr. Moore's lawsuit was not a surprise. He has a demonstrated penchant for last-minute legal theatrics. In 2015, he tried, unsuccessfully, to block same-sex marriages from moving forward hours before they were to begin, and he and his allies have spent the last several weeks signaling their unease with this month's voting process. Indeed, while saying little else publicly, Mr. Moore has been soliciting contributions for an election integrity fund. Mr. Moore's court filing ran for dozens of pages, and it argued that returns in Jefferson County, the state's most populous county, confirmed election fraud. It also said that turnout in the county was suspiciously high. It suggested that Mr. Jones had benefited from voter intimidation. And it argued that Mr. Moore's opponents had spread lies and fraudulent misrepresentations. At the least, Mr. Moore wants a judge to keep Mr. Merrill and other officials from certifying the election results on Thursday afternoon. But his lawyers also suggested that a judge consider calling a new election to fill the Senate seat that Jeff Sessions vacated to become United States Attorney General. Mr. Moore has spent weeks ignoring calls that he concede the election, defying the wishes of President Trump, who endorsed his campaign, and other Republican leaders. It was not immediately clear when a judge would consider Mr. Moore's complaint or the affidavits from several people his campaign described as experts in elections. One has claimed to have mathematically proved a conspiracy to assassinate President John F. Kennedy.